Hi, my name is Gene Sanders. I'm, I guess, the bad boy of this group here of innocent young men. I went in the Army in 1968 and I retired in 1997 and enjoyed it for the most part, probably 99.9% of the time, and had an opportunity to learn a lot. I think some of the greatest things that I learned from the Army will help anyone in their Christian walk. When I joined the Army, I was no longer an individual. They taught us to be a team. We fought as a team, we played as a team, we slept as a team, we did everything as a team. No one was better than the other. And if somebody tried to get out of line in terms of wanting to do their own thing, then the system worked to pull them back in or run them off. When you stop and think about it, soldiers were trained to function as a team, just like Christ trained his disciples to function as a team. He didn't want to make one of them feel that he was better or lesser than the other. It's kind of funny because in the beginning, Christ knew that Judas was going to betray him. But he treated him with respect and love throughout the whole process. Never made him feel less. Always hoping that there would be a change, giving him an opportunity. The Army taught me some important values. One was discipline. You got to have discipline, rules. You got to have respect for others. And probably most importantly, you got to work. And it didn't hurt to work, and you needed to have a vocation. It was great. I couldn't complain about the time I even spent in Vietnam, almost 3 years. I enjoyed it. I was an advisor, so I didn't live with the troops as much as others would. A lot of times I would wear civilian clothes and carry a little 38 small on my back, and I would live out in the villages. And if I did wear a uniform, it was usually a South Vietnamese National Police uniform because I was an advisor to their government. So I had a good time with the people. I didn't really have any bad feelings. The concerns I had when I was in the Army at that point was the attitude back home from America. There was no support for the Army. Mm-hmm. I remember coming home from the Army and being told, don't wear your uniform, no pride in the uniform, you're baby killers. And when you come home, come in civilian clothes and then go on home. A lot of us were just kind of dropped on the street. I got out of the Army the first time in '73, and then I went back in '78, and then finally retired in '97. But I worked for the federal government, the United States Army, all the way up until 2010, both as a civilian or as a government contractor. So I enjoyed that side of life, and it was a team, so you knew you had somebody that always had your back, and I always appreciated that. You get out here in civilian life, if you're not involved in a church that has small groups or that has things that you like to do, like motorcycle groups or car groups or sewing groups or whatever, you're kind of on your own. And Satan loves that. But if you get a group of Christians together, it's kind of hard for him to interfere because the stronger ones in the group are going to hold the weaker ones and bring them back into the fold. And that was kind of like the way the Army was. If I were to suggest to anybody today whether it's proper to serve in the military, I would say a big yes to that. In terms of what your background is would determine what service that you would serve in. But until you serve this country in one fashion or another, you work at the VA hospital as a doctor or a nurse, or you do something for the government, you really don't appreciate what we have here, because we don't get a chance to go overseas and see that this nation is the richest nation in the world. And there is so much abundance here where there is very little abundance anywhere else. and you appreciate life. I think that our younger generation today would appreciate more about the freedoms that they have to do the silly things that they want to do. It's not because of politicians. It's because of those soldiers that we served with that gave their all, that died for this country. I didn't die for this country. So I'm not one of the heroes. They are the heroes of this nation. They are the ones that give you and I the right to sit here, complain, to go out there in the street and riot, act like fools, go to church, do whatever we want to do to worship in any way we want. It's the soldier. It's not a politician, and it's not the laws. So I would say service to your country is the same as service to God. If you do it right, you'll do well. I've been in this church since 1997. And got involved in the church first for my son because they had a wonderful youth group. Got involved with the youth and have been busy ever since. Started out several years after we were here with a group. Some of them are still members of the church. We put together a group called Blood and Fire to go downtown, cook, and feed the hungry. And we would feed up to 350, 2 Saturdays a month. Well, these people were homeless folks, mothers and fathers that had children. And I had a lot of divorcees, people that were dealing with their own personal problems, but they would volunteer from the church to go down there, get their mind off of their personal problem, reach out and give back. That's one thing I like about this church is that the attitude is, we're not going to judge you when you come in. You got enough of that. It's between you and God to work that out. But if you want to be involved, we got something for you to do. And if we don't, and you come up with an idea, I've always heard Bo, somebody would go to him, Bo, I got this great idea. And if it's a good idea, Bo say, well, take it and run with it. That's good. That is something that is really great about this church. The other thing is that we do have a strong youth. We have a lot of members of the church with a desire to make sure that the youth are taken care of. A lot of churches don't do that. I think it's because they don't realize that tomorrow's leaders are our youth.
That's right.
And if they're going to go wild, and we do nothing about it, then we're going to have wild people running this country. I guess that's about it.
Okay. Well, y'all all mentioned various situations that you were involved in when you served. How was the Lord protecting you and the people that you were with when you were serving in your various capacities in the Army and in the Navy?
Well, these two guys, at least Chuck mentioned earlier that he was a Christian when he went in. I'll put it this way, I was baptized before I went in, but I wasn't. You would never know I was a Christian. I mean, and I'm not proud of any of them, but I come from a very poor family, and that's no excuse. But I smoked and drank and played around when I was in the Army. I was a playboy. And so I didn't deserve God's protection. But as I look back at Vietnam, all of the situations that I were in, where I would be in on a cordon search, or I'd be entering a village, and there would be a grenade to go off, or there'd be somebody running through a hooch, or there'd be a platoon of Viet Cong, and I'm just foolish, I'm out there with my guys, sometimes with my 45, sometimes with 38, sometimes with no weapon in civilian clothes, and these people are passing by. Years later, as I look back at it, I said, well, I wasn't in tune with God, but He was in tune with me. He was looking out for me, and even at that time, when I reached the point to change the way I lived, I met my wife, and my wife says, I'll marry you if you'll stop drinking, smoking, and go to church with me. And I did that. It's been 39 years this year that we've been together, 2 wonderful kids. But she's been my backbone, and I think that the Lord provided that. But I think all of the things that I did that were not right, God can use those because I was there. And so when these kids are dealing with similar situations, especially with the youth group. I can interface with that. I can talk about it. You know, I can try to encourage them not to go down that road for the following reasons. One, you know, I lived it, and I think it comes over much better for a youth to know that somebody's been there. And it also creates an environment where I'm less judgmental. Like our youth, when we take them on camp, we try not to encourage them to smoke. But you know, if they have a smoking habit, having had it, it's hard. So you've got to make allowances. So you either got to take the kid aside so others don't see, and give him or her a chance to have that cigarette, you know, because they are 18 and 19 and 20 years old. And so they can legally do that, rather than playing hardball, because I've been there. And so the attitude is a little bit different. God protected me no matter what I did.
Exactly.
And I did some very crazy things. I was out in the boonies, in an area we weren't supposed to be, and we didn't know that we were there because the map was wrong. And if we would have got caught, we had sensitive stuff with us. The Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, would have had fun. One time I was out with my advisors in a village, and we didn't know that there was a long-range patrol, a LERB team, we called them. Remember the LERBs? That from the 501st to the 101st Airborne Division was out, and they were looking for a high-value target, Viet Cong general, and they were going to take him out with their snipers. Well, we were about 3 clicks off from them, and in this general direction of where they were headed for. So it got a little dicey, because then they started maneuvering towards our direction, and we'd hear faint noises and whatnot. And then, of course, my counterparts were Vietnamese, and they were talking in Vietnamese. So,
yeah.
You know, later when I met up with the lieutenant, he told me, he says, you know, you don't realize it, but you were within 30 seconds of being wiped out, all of you, with our snipers sitting up on the hill. And the only reason why they didn't do it is one of them, when he had the scope on, turned around and looked at me and saw that beret that I had on from the South Vietnamese in the uniform was on what we called back in the day, round eye, a white man. And they said, well, that's got to be an American advisor or a Russian. He said he still didn't take his finger off the trigger, because we had Russians too, you know, Russian advisors. The Spetsnaz, as I talked about earlier, the real elite special forces of the Russians. We came across several of them. So I could have easily been taken out and no questions asked. But I think it was the Lord holding this man's trigger, the Lord saying, no, wait a minute, we're not going to do this. Because I've been in situations where I've ordered my people, don't even hesitate to shoot. And if that situation would have been reversed, I wouldn't be here today. So
praise the Lord.
So he's taking good care of me.